pre-show is that the lovely internet takes a little time for it to send the stream across the different channels. You could be watching on YouTube. You could be watching on my Team Superdad page on Facebook. You might even be watching this on my own personal Twitter or Facebook page. Wherever you're watching, it's really great to have you here. In just a minute, I will be introducing Tony and Errol to... Tony, I've known you since 2007. Errol, I've known you since 2010. So it's a real pleasure to have you on here, guys. I'm just going to check in on my Facebook page and then share this to the Team Superdad group, which is always a quick F5 there. Tonight's Expert Hangout, we're talking about waking up to racism. And as I'll say when we kick this off, this is just about my awakening as anybody else's. So let's share this into the Team Superdad group. If you are a dad and you want to know more about the Team Superdad group, then come on over. We are a group of dads who want more. That is to be more, make more, and play more in life. Team Superdad. There we go. And then we just put that there. We are live. They do say that blokes can't do more than two things at once.
So true.
So true. Ask questions as we go along. Okay, so post that. Good evening. Welcome to the Team Superdad Expert Hangout. It's Monday night, as always, 8 o'clock, sometimes 5 minutes later. We are here, though, around the world, across the different Team Superdad channels, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. It's great to have you here. Team Superdad is a community of dads who want more. We are supercharging dads' lives across the world, whether you want to be more, make more, or play more. It really is about, those areas where perhaps you want to be a bit fitter, perhaps you want to have a bit more time with your kids, have a slightly better relationship. What I found in my life is that we try and do too much. We try and, we're great in one area and perhaps just hope that the other area is going to be all right. Well, what if there were people around us who were super good at staying fit and someone else was super good at managing their money? Well, they're the kind of people we want to get together with and just build community, build groups, build, that whole idea of we are the six people we spend our most time with. So let's make sure we're hanging out with some good people as often as possible. And tonight very much exemplifies that, as I'm hanging out with two awesome guys. Tony, who's top left on my screen, and Errol, who's in the middle underneath both of us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Expert Hangout tonight. And thanks so much for accepting my invitation. Tony, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good as well as can be. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Whereabouts are you in the world, Tony? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm in Stoke Newington. I'm a Baptist minister and I pastor a church there. I was in East London in a place called Aldersbrook, which many people haven't heard of, so it's really hard to explain where it is. But it's nice and leafy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been in ministry for about 7 years now, and I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, of course, because when we first met, you weren't, were you? No,
That's right. Yes, yeah. My last secular job was working for British Transport Police in the recruitment division, and I helped police officers go through their promotions.
That's exactly right. Now I totally remember that. Well, thank you so much. And Stoke Newington, that's kind of London area still, isn't it?
Yeah, London.
Geezer.
Near Hackney. Near Hackney.
So East London, good, awesome. Yeah. And how big's your, the church is?
It's roughly about 80.
Okay, right,
yeah.
Nice.
So it's a nice fair number.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much for having us here tonight. And Errol, where are you? And
Johnny J.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. Thanks for putting this together, man. So based in Birmingham, I lead a church called the Bridge Church in a place called Harborne in Birmingham. We're a church plant. So we're just a year old now, 12 months old.
Yeah.
And, God has been doing amazing things. And whilst doing that, I'm also running a business where we provide mentoring, training, leadership development, consultancy, predominantly in the education sector, but also in some other private and public spaces too.
Yeah. And I know how many lives you've impacted, Errol. Of course you have as well, Tony, but I know through Errol's work, coaching kids in schools, teenagers, your books. I mean, you're being I'll speak on your behalf and acknowledge you for how many families and the lives of young people you have made a difference in. So thank you for being you.
Oh, thank God, man. Thank you, man.
Yeah, awesome. So this is uncomfortable, guys, right? I mean, Paul watching, Marsha watching, if anybody else is watching, please, and I can see, normally we get about 200 to 300 people on the lives across the different channels. So if you are watching them, please help us, start a watch party, share this in the different groups that you're participating in. If you're watching on the replay, still do that. Thank you very much. Kobe scratching, good to have you on. There's going to be, I'm expecting quite a few more, and I just want to say up front, like, this subject, it's not me jumping on a bandwagon. It's been a real eye opener. I was on a Zoom call on, it was Monday night, I think it was, Tony, wasn't it? And it was a group of us who were all friends from different landmark courses, and I was the only white person. I was the only white guy. Tony, I think you were the only other guy on there.
I wasn't there.
Oh, you weren't there? Okay.
No, I wasn't there. No.
Right.
I missed
Okay.
it.
You obviously, people were saying, talk to Tony. But it was just, people from Iran, people from the Caribbean, other people from different parts of Africa, Sangeeta from Pakistan. And obviously everything's going on with America and George Floyd, and it's just really awoken in me the reality that I don't really know much about the subject of racism. And the posts that I've seen this week saying it's not enough not to be racist, it's time that we stood up and were anti-racist. And slogans like that, Raheem Sterling springs to mind, as over the last 18 months, a footballer who's been high profile and really raised the topic of racism, anti-racism. The England football team, over I forget where it was, but it was in Eastern Europe. And I hear these news items, I have an opinion, like, okay, that's outrageous, and I just get back on with my life. And it's in this week, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, that I've really, and this Zoom call on Monday, that I've really questioned, how much do I know? Like, how much do I stand up for this subject? I wouldn't be okay with someone being racially abusive to a friend of mine standing next to me in a pub, or even to someone I didn't know in a pub. But still, how much have I turned a blind eye to? And that could be made no more apparent by watching the 13th this week on Netflix, and just seeing like a story unfold of a journey from slavery through to 2.5 million people in American prisons, and what percentage of those are black, and how much it like plays on communities. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't have a clue. And then you think, well, in what other circumstances are people allowed things to go on for too long under the premise of, well, it doesn't really affect me, or I don't understand it, and it's not too close to turning a blind eye, basically. And so this tonight is me saying I don't want to turn a blind eye anymore. So, and I want to make it clear, we're not here to dig up shocking stories. We're not here to to rally people to anything that they're not already rallied to. But if I can become more conscious out of this conversation tonight, then I feel that that other people might be able to as well. And I'm so thrilled that you two were able to take me up on this invitation, because I know, obviously, clearly you have personal perspective on it, but as well representing different communities in Birmingham, in London, and some of how that experience, you're both married, you got children, you got wives. Like, there's a lot here where I've got children, I was married, hopefully I will be married again. Like, we're just guys, and I think that the more that we can realize that everybody's opportunities in life should be the same. People shouldn't feel different concerns when they hear a police siren than other people. People shouldn't go into a job having different concerns than another person because of their skin color. And that, for me, is really the heart and the intention of tonight's call. So thanks. I've written some questions. I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and read them. I think we just hopefully just go with the flow. If we hit the normal kind of time for this, then we'll let the live stream carry on. But for anyone listening to the podcast, I'll probably I'll cut it in half and do a second episode. And I just thank you all for joining us. Feel free to ask questions. I can see them coming in, and I'll try and field them and share them with Errol and Tony. And let's just go for it. Let's see what we can make happen.
Good.
So I've got here's a good question to start us off with, right? What do black people want to be called, right? It's like uncomfortable, yeah. I see more and more people on TV, black people saying, "Oh, we are people of color," and then Black Lives Matter is on signs all around the world. Blame is the black. Starts with black. I know it's Asian, and I don't even know what the hell. This is kind of like my level of awareness. I don't even know what blame fully stands for. How does that sit with you guys? How do you refer to yourselves?
Well, I suppose let me answer first, because I like to answer first on that one. I'd like to be called black, simply because I couldn't say, oh, I had a chat with Johnny, and the other day he's a pink pasty kind of looking guy with a bit of a tan. He's a white guy. That's me personally. Just call me a black guy. When it becomes Tony's a person of color, it's like, what are you talking about? You feel a bit awkward.
It's not natural.
It's just not natural. Just call me black. It's okay. It's fine. Just the other bits that are added on don't need to be added on. That's all.
Yeah. Well, when I was thinking about that, I'm happy to be called white, but I haven't got all the other connotations that come with the different layers that perhaps come with it. So.
Yeah, political correctness, right?
Yeah.
We're in this world now. Everyone's trying to make everyone feel comfortable, and so what do we call them? Do we call them? Are they black? Are they people of color? Are they BAME and BME and BAME and like we're just black? I personally, and I can't speak. I won't try to speak for every black person.
No, of course.
Because know that there's some black person out there feels like they want to be called Nubian or they want to be called African or something else. But I'm happy with black. Black's cool.
And are you both of black African origin, or is it Caribbean, or what's your generational kind of origins there?
Caribbean.
Right.
Caribbean, Jamaica.
Man, I can hear it now.
Well, that's a good question though, because oftentimes there's a disconnect. Because I would say, well, my parents are Jamaican. Interestingly, I did a DNA test recently, and my DNA showed me that my root is in Nigeria.
Okay.
In fact, a tribe called the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria is where my root is. Now, so there's a journey, a historical genealogy going back to Nigeria, right? One of the challenges for a lot of us as black people growing up in this country was that there's no sense of roots, there's no sense of culture, there's no sense of where we actually come from. And so it's really important, I think, for black people to understand, but also for white people to understand as well, that number one, there's a challenge around who am I, my identity, my culture, my history, because I don't know. I when we grew up in school, in primary school, I remember seeing we did a thing called a 24-hour famine, and this was like it was like this thing that some charity had run where we were going on this kind of famine thing to raise money for starving kids in Africa, and so our conditioning around Africa was that there were starving kids who were swatting flies, who were poor, we did not want to be anything near African. I remember two sisters that came to our primary school from Africa. And when they came, we mocked them, we bullied them because you're African, and so there's this kind of disconnect that we've been programmed to even dislike our own historical roots.
Yeah.
And so that's caused an identity crisis too.
Yeah, I mean you're already touching on elements of themes inside that documentary, The 13th, and I'll speak about The 13th because I just watched it the other day. I know there's lots of others. I know that my level of knowledge is this thin, but it was just they were saying in there this how talking about black crime in America and over the generations of what they've done with the prison system and the change in the laws, where black communities are outraged about the violent black people, and so they came to accept themselves as, oh, we are to be feared. We are, and then you said it a minute ago as well, Tony, before we press record, like going into a job and kind of trying to quieten yourself down for fear of what people already think of you. And there was something that went around the internet today as well. I took a screen grab of it. Where is it? I have to make myself smaller or be labelled an angry black person, like, which is pretty much what you were saying there. So, Errol, this I can really see that as well, because growing with us very similar age. Tony, how old are you? I think you're
54.
So you got a couple of years on me and Errol. But yeah, like Ethiopia, Band Aid, Live Aid. Yeah, I can totally see that. Like you're from Africa, but actually Africa's full of starving people who are poor and you can't be proud of that when actually well, that's like some weird twisted thing inside. And again, it's a level of complete unawareness as a white person there, not thinking or feeling anything the same as what you guys are experiencing there.
Yeah.
And how many black people were in your school, Errol? Is it what kind of community did you grow up in?
So I grew up in the inner city, Birmingham. So a place called Handsworth in Birmingham. Went to a primary school called St. Mary's, which was predominantly black and Asian. You might have had maybe one or two white kids in our year group, you know.
Okay.
But I then passed my 11 plus and went to a grammar school on the other side of Birmingham, a place called Sutton Coldfield, where I was the only black boy in my year group. So
culture shock.
It's culture shock, mate. Culture shock. I was surrounded by I had some good friends there, but there was some real racist people there. And you know what? I had a WhatsApp message today to check the Twitter feed of my old school, and apparently there's some posts where they got some kids dressed up in slavery and all this chains and stuff, you know, and talking about like the culture that was there when I was there is still there, basically, right? So that was really, really tough. But something you said earlier about having to play small, to be small, to silence yourself. Just to give some context to that, right?
Yeah.
So it's a quick story, just for context. So age 14, myself and some friends, my cousin, we go to Coventry. We live in Birmingham. We get a bus to Coventry. It's an hour journey. And we get there in the afternoon. We're walking through the town centre, and some security guards start kind of following us, and we notice them. And we'll get to the end of this concourse, and the police are waiting there for us. And they say, we're arresting you on suspicion of robbery. And we're like, huh? Like what? And so I asked, like, when did this happen? Like, what time was this? I said it was this morning. And so I showed him my bus ticket, my day saver ticket.
Yeah.
That was evidence that I was still in Birmingham then. Hadn't even gotten the bus, you know. We're arresting you anyway, they said. And so they locked us up, and my dad came to get us from Birmingham. And the interesting thing was that day I got home and I got my backside whooped that day. Yeah. Now, and this was the thing. I got whooped because I shouldn't have been there. Now, it wasn't a case of an injustice was done. Let's go to the police and complaints commission, whatever. Let's protest.
Yeah.
It was, you shouldn't have been there. And so if you can imagine just the whole mindset of that culture, where we're conditioned from a young age just to say, you know what, don't expect anything different. Don't fight back. Keep your head down. Work hard. Don't get caught up. And so from a young age, that's how we were trained to even think. There was no other reality. There was no way we could, and so it took a lot. It's taken a lot to fight through that, to shake that off, and to break through by the grace of God and start doing stuff.
Wow, that just, I mean, and well, I'm just processing that really, because again, I think that I'm 14. How many times have I walked through the shopping centres, And we'll come back to that definitely. But Tony, you said the same thing when black police knocking at your door.
Yeah.
This was recently, was it? And you said again, another what are you doing here? Why are you knocking on my door again?
Yeah, and it's quite funny because we was chatting last week and we was talking about how would I recognize the doorbell ringing that it was the police, because I immediately got up and went, somebody's ringing the doorbell like it's the police. And I went to the door and I was just about to like make a joke, and it was the police. And I thought, well, how did they know I'm on the computer protesting? And it wasn't that they said they had a call for number 5, and did I make that call? And I said no. So you're not flat 5, and I live in a 4-story house. And I said, no, you sure? And it was like, are you sure? I said, this is, and I had the attitude then, this is all one house, and, and then they walked off, and, nothing else happened. But I was still shaken, and because it could have turned out totally different.
Yeah.
And you feel that all the time. I live quite close to the police station. So when you hear the sirens, or when you're driving through a traffic lights and you hear the sirens, my belly goes, because I'm thinking, is it going to be me this time? I have been stopped a few times, and one classic time was you fit the description of XYZ that we're looking for. And I just come back from marriage counselling with my minister, and they've left me,
Yeah.
So you go through that, and it's like, oh, this is part of life. Errol was explaining the type of schools that he was in, and I was in a school called Forest Hill Boys. It was predominantly white in my first year, and then it got more mixed, shall I say. I grew up in the time of the New Cross fire, and my best friend was in that fire. So he was at 13, I think
And
it
what
was.
was the New Cross fire, just in case people don't know?
New Cross fire, I can't remember the year. What year is? Do you know, Errol? Can you remember?
I can't remember. Sorry,
Yeah.
now.
Basically, it was a party in New Cross, and
1981.
yeah, and I think it was 13 that died in that fire. Protests transpired after that because there was no resolve on it to this day. But you can imagine being at school. There's no counselling back then, so you're at school, you're sitting in the classroom, and your best friend is not sitting next to you. And even the headmaster walks in and says, have you seen Andrew? And I say no, and then he just walks off, and nothing further than that was said, other than announced in school that he was dead. And to have the experience of walking in the playground, remember, no counselling, no care, and white kids walking up to you and saying, oh, I see you didn't get burnt.
Like mocking you, kind of like
playground,
like kind of playground banter, but like clearly deeply offensive. So just so people know, there was a house fire in 1981. There was a house party, and the blaze killed 13 young black people aged between 14 and 22.
Yeah, and you don't get over it. You deal with it and you remember it, and it's I suppose it's not as painful as it was back then, but it still hurts when you think that people would carelessly say something like that when you're grieving. It's a huge loss. But those are the kind of experiences. It's not to make anybody feel guilty. What happened to George Floyd, why people don't understand why all black people are up in arms, because it reminds you of everything that you've gone through, where you have suppressed your own breath in what has happened to you. It might be large, it might be small, but it's equally as painful. There is no therapy or class that you can go to, no treatment that you can go to discuss racism. There is if you've been raped or victim of various crimes, etc., trauma, post-traumatic disorder. You can have some kind of treatment. You can't have any discussion forum or to talk to someone about the racism that you go through and you have to deal with. And most importantly, the worst thing is that you have to actually suck it up and deal with it and be the better person.
Yeah.
But
And that's what I'm saying about thinking this week about feeling it, and it ties into what you were saying, Errol, is someone growing up feeling like there's this glass ceiling just above them where they can have to limit their self-expression, or where they go, or how loud they might be at a party, or I mean, some of the stories obviously from America, they're all being brought back up now, and people have been shot in certain scenarios where they were doing nothing, where they were holding an ice cream, where they were in their own house, where they were and this isn't necessarily for us to comment on some of those things, because people can go and find it on the internet. But I was really curious was about just how that manifests itself in the UK, and what it's like as a black person to experience that. And what I hear inside of all this is how generational it is.
Yeah.
Like
definitely.
if your parents felt a little bit oppressed, and their grandparents felt a little bit oppressed, then you've got generations of people growing up who have not been able to fully express themselves. Like if you put a plant in a pot that's too small for it, it needs to grow. People need to express themselves. So I think this touches neatly into the whole stop and search, which you don't hear so much about in the TV and news these days, but it's been more of a prominent subject in your communities and in your experience growing up. How does that play out? What's that like? How oppressive is that? I'm talking about like police stop and search, and the proportion of how many more black people get stopped and searched than others.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess, really. The stats speak for themselves. It's just there is such a mistrust between the police and the communities that they serve, that it's just created an environment and a culture in which there's just hostility. There's hostility between two sides. So you can imagine, a police officer, a white police officer who's you've seen things like teach first, right? Let's bring it out of the police thing, right? You see like the teach first, like in schools now, they bring in something like teach first will train up a teacher, really quickly, and they come from a leafy suburb into a inner city comprehensive with no reference points, no understanding. They don't know the culture, don't know the language, all that stuff, and they come in and it's like they sink. They absolutely they struggle because like it's so far from them, right? Well, if you give that person some handcuffs, some CS spray, a baton, a badge, a uniform, and you put them in that context, what they're gonna do? They have no understanding. They have no way of connecting, no way of relating. They don't, and they've got the authority now of the police, yeah, behind them. So it makes for a bad concoction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I can see as well in that situation that person, the police person more than the teacher, they're suddenly in a state of fear. So their actions aren't necessarily consistent with their own beliefs or their own, and so that like creating flashpoints of disconnect. I can really see that there's where communication, where understanding, where relatedness should exist, there's disconnect and fear and resentment.
And there's no doubt you get those that for whom it's like they're going to get those bad black people anyway. They've come into the job to go to that part of the city or country to deal with those bad black people or those bad Asians or whatever. You know what I mean? That's what their program is.
But I wrote in my notes about this today, like the idea, and I'm not from a low class or low income community. Even this whole expression about white privilege, like up until this week, I heard that as, how dare you throw that around? Like, don't throw that at me. I'm like white privilege. Like, I'm not. Even the politicians, you're kind of like, well, yeah, maybe that's how they grew up, but they're trying to do a job for us. Why are you throwing it at them? And a lady I know, Ola, she said, you got to understand the context of that. It's take away the negativity and just say that they have a privilege, that they were in that situation. They don't have to have a different context. Their context was their leafy suburb or whatever their upbringing was. And so that gives them that white privilege. Not take away the not negative, not good or bad. They have a white privilege. They have a perspective that isn't broad enough to really consider all needs and feelings. I've lost my train of thought slightly, but damn it. It'll come back to me. What was my concern about that? It's completely gone.
It's okay.
It'll come back.
It'll come back.
Wait till you get to 54.
No, I know. I'm just trying to pick up the whole conversation though. But Errol, where did you leave us on what you were saying a second ago?
So I was saying the example of Teach First, we're talking about white police officer comes in, has no reference points. Some come in because that's their mission to deal with those black people. So you end up with hostility. You're talking about stop and search and what have you.
I was talking about communities. Yeah, I got it. I'm back in the room. Communities, right? So if you take an inner city community and all the associations that people have with that, crime, drugs, even down to really rape, bad, just distinctly bad people. There's a level at which that is put upon a particular community, a black community maybe, but actually it's far more circumstantial than it is a comment on their race or origins. Surely, it's a human thing. Put in those circumstances, this is what we will degenerate to, regardless of where we come from. Is that a problem in some of those inner city or lower income communities, you think?
If I want to jump in here, I hate that narrative. I hate the narrative because historically there's so much evidence of flourishing black communities. I'm gonna go back to America first of all. I can go back to when my grandparents were in Jamaica and how they flourished there. But even the times I think it was in the 60s in America when Detroit was booming and so many parts of the country were booming black businesses. Talk about Oklahoma and Tulsa and all these parts of the country were just thriving. The black pound was like the pound for companies to go after, the black dollar.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until certain policies came in place that impacted the black communities. If you go and check out what happened in Tulsa, the bombing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the police force flew planes over, bombed and lynched the black community, just purely because it was a racist environment, but they were prospering so much that they wiped out a whole community and killed hundreds of people, as an example. So the black history is not one of poverty, is not one of black people don't have that background.
Yeah,
they don't have that. Do you know what I'm saying to you? It's not who we are.
No.
But so the narrative and what's sold, media, and all that kind of stuff, it's just over the last kind of 20, not 20, since those years, let's say, the narrative that's coming and if I can say one more thing on this, the prison pipeline that's been created. So the prison, big business. Some of you guys might know how these private prisons are owned, or the record labels, the big record companies own a lot of these private prisons. And so they understand that if we put this music out, this violence, this crime, and all the different things, we program their kids towards violence and crime. We get them along this prison pipeline.
Yeah.
Our prisons are populated. And so it's all very intentional, all very strategic.
Is the problems in the American prison system similar in the UK? Is that happening here in the UK, or I have read today how many more I've got the numbers here, the disproportionate number of black people in UK prisons. This says I can't verify these stats. I just found them online today. It's in the UK. I make up 14% of the UK population, but 25% of the prison population. So it's a different system here in the UK, but there's still disproportionate number of black people in prison in the UK than there is white people.
Yeah, I've done prison ministry in both Wandsworth and Brixton Prison. It was about a while back, and it was the first time ever that I was going into prison to actually do ministry. And so even for me as a black person, I was totally shocked by the number of black men that were in there. People that were doing life and we were in their 60s, 70s in prison, and to have the whole chapel filled with black men sitting there. At first I was nervous, but I ministered, and it was just so hard to grasp that so many of my black brothers are in there, regardless of whether they are guilty or not.
Yeah.
The fact that there's so many of them in there, and unfortunately other people get away with a lot of stuff, but it did shock me. It did shock me, and that's me as a black man.
Well, some people would say go on.
Go on.
Well, some people would say, oh yeah, if you did the crime then you should go to prison, but you got to keep going back behind that and say, well, okay, but what's causing that, and then what position were they put in that, and then what position were their family put in that, and then even down to the number of families that leaves growing up without a father, but growing up without a man figure in the family. And can I just say, I appreciate the questions and comments from Rose and Jenny and Tyler. It's just I really appreciate the people that are watching and commenting on the video, so thank you. Sorry, going back to what you said, Tony, the disproportionate number of black people in the UK prison population, is that a case you think of heavy-handedness in the way that black communities are policed, or is, can you see any reason for that? Or is it racially motivated in any way, do you think?
I mean, just talking as a normal person, where black people are there, and what I've seen on the streets, they are victimized, and yes, there are certain people from the black community that are making it much more difficult for us to change the narrative, especially when the press and anybody else connected to that the media, shall I say, will focus on that rather than the good that black people are doing, which causes the fear. And then I suppose for some people, they get the delusions of grandeur, that they're big, bad, and black, and they can do this and they can do that, because there's no other alternative. I suppose in jobs. I mean, people are now deciding that they want to, do drugs and be drug seller because they're making money, and they want to live the life of what the rap artists or what the music industry is actually showing them.
Which ties into what Errol was saying. There's a degree there of like propaganda and positioning and influencing people in a negative way, which in itself should be an eye opener to people. It should shock people. In that documentary, The 13th, tells you about Alec. It's a political and corporate entity that helps shape laws in America. It's just startling. It's I don't know how much of it goes on in the UK, but I think it's important that we at least have an understanding of what goes on. And if you're saying it's not just enough to say, well, there's more of this particular type of person in prison because they must have done the crime, but saying, well, what's going on in that community? Are they being arrested more regularly than white people? Are they? Certainly, from what I read this week in America, someone who's committed a crime and is white, the same person, if they're black and committed the same crime, is more likely to go to prison for the same crime. which in itself does nothing for the communities that those people come from.
I suppose one way to look at the comparisons between the two countries are America is overt and the UK is covert in their racism.
Right.
In general, and I made that statement because what we experience is usually in a covert way.
Right.
It's very subtle, and it's still equally as painful.
Okay, this is great. I definitely wanted to touch on this. So what is that like? As a black person going about your day-to-day business, what are some of the just low level? Someone said to me today, Ola said to me, not this week, she said, do you know what, Johnny? It's, that expression, like 1,000 little cuts. That's what it's like. She said, that is what it's like. And you couldn't imagine what that's like unless you were me. And she goes, and worse than that, she goes, I'm a black woman, so I get both double whammy. She goes, so what are those 1,000 cuts? What is that covert, perhaps by some people, inadvertent racism that happens on a regular basis?
For me, I think it started quite early, looking for jobs, and you send your CVs out. My first name is Leroy.
Right.
I am now Tony.
Yeah.
As soon as I changed my CV, I was fine. I could get interviews.
Wow.
I would get jobs, the whole thing. And that was quite easy. And it was one manager that said to me when I was in the job, I think you need to change your name to Tony. And I did, just trying to have a quiet life. And it just made things easier because I used to do sales calls and, you say, my name's Tony Ashley. And, would you like to come and meet me? And they come to the office and they sit downstairs in reception. And then you go downstairs and they say, my name is Tony Ashley. Hi, nice to meet you. And they look at you like, oh, so was he expecting a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person? It's me, and it's just, it's that all the time. So you change your name. I would have 4 shopping bags in my hand, and I'll be walking down the street, and a lady will be grabbing a handbag.
Right.
Those little subtle things, or not being served, or waiting a long time to be served. And most of the times I never cotton on because I'm black. But you'd be waiting ages, in a restaurant.
In a pub or restaurant? Oh, a restaurant. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like you're small either, Tony.
No, you can't miss. You can't miss me.
Sorry, I didn't see you over there.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the strange. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and it's just one of those things you just feel like, oh, I don't even want to talk about it, And at the same time, if I don't educate people and let them understand how you feel in some groups, even in some churches, how one is made to feel. And the older generations will actually tell you their stories of when they came over here and they thought, well, I'm going to church. That's what they did over there. I'm going to church, and made to feel unwelcomed. And funny enough, that situation still happens, but not with the black people. It's with the Iranians. And I've had Iranians coming from West London to my church in East London because they were made to feel totally unwelcomed in a predominantly white church.
Wow. Yeah, okay.
And it's that sense of and then what happened was that there were some white people that left our church because they were uncomfortable with the Iranians coming into church.
All under the basis of we're Christians together.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Of course. Yeah. Wow. So we're doing, people are doing it to each other. It's like there is a degree to it. This is a conversation about black people, but you're talking here really about the racial intolerance between all races of people to each other.
Yeah.
And do you know, I've written a whole bunch of stuff today. I like to think that I don't see people's color any more than I see he's short, she's got glasses on. Like, of course I see it. Am I more attracted to white women than I am Chinese women or black women? Like, yes, I am. Right now, so there's things that I observe, like how I notice people differently. It doesn't mean I'm not attracted to any black people. Like, it's just I'm just maybe I'm like in that inquiry where I see people, I notice people come up. If someone's being aggressive or loud in a playground, particularly around here in Maidstone, it will more commonly be a white family, a bit of an aggro kind of, council estate sort of family, than it will be the Polish family, who are probably there with a couple of generations of family. There might be 3 or 4 families having a picnic together. They're sticking together, but they're hanging out, they're behaving, and they seem more approachable than perhaps some of the leirier British families going on. So it is interesting to hear that your experience there of different races and that intolerance across the board. Wow. How you read a lot about how it's harder to be a black person. You just touched on there, Tony, about getting a job and stuff. Errol, you went to a grammar school, so that was a positive, but you're the only black person there. To what degree is it real? To what degree is it harder? I don't think white people truly understand that. I think they see it on TV and be like, yeah, it can't be that bad, surely. But like, how real is that?
Like, I have to be clear, like, I'm not a victim, and I'm not trying to be in any kind of victim mentality or mindset. I'm not denying the struggle. I'm not denying how hard it's been for me, but by the grace of God, God has helped me to overcome that, and I feel no inferiority or intimidation by any race at this stage in my life. The reality is that when something like George Floyd happens, it shows that there's a communal trauma, and there are individual trauma that hasn't been addressed in so many lives. People, these day-to-day slights, day-to-day jibes, day-to-day, someone not giving you an opportunity, someone overlooking you, someone not taking you seriously, someone choosing not to involve you in a conversation or talk to you as though you're not human, someone talking down to you, someone you're standing with 3 people and you're having a 3-way chat and someone acts like you're not there, or so you're standing talking to someone and someone comes and steps in your conversation as though you're not there and ignores you completely. Someone doesn't welcome you or greet you. These are the typical things that happen on a day-to-day. You get overlooked for a position because you're too black. You get overlooked for a promotion because of it. These are things that people are encountering on a day in, day out basis. Now, let me say that I want to add to that to say that I remember reading an article about Trevor McDonald, the newsreader.
Yeah.
And they asked him and said, Trevor McDonald, how did you get so high to become the News at 10 anchor? You're on TV every night. And he said, I didn't see racism. Didn't see it. I kept my head down and I kept going. And he just focused like that. And what you will get in life, there are different people respond in different ways. Even in my grandparents' era, when they were being chased around by these teddy boys, they call them, and all that's going on, right? There were some black people who somehow they kept going, right? And I know Professor Richard Sargent, I remember him saying to me about there are different types. He said there's some that are called strategic conformists, he says. And those who are in denial of the existence of racism. They don't see it as far as they're concerned. And they've made a strategic decision to get to the top and just get there no matter what. And so they're prepared to sell their mums, and dads if need be to achieve their goal. You will have those kinds of people. Not that it's not happening to them, but they conform and they get there. Then you got those who are the survivors, he said. Survivors are those who they're fully aware of the reality of racism, discrimination, but they're not prepared to put their head above the parapet. They're not prepared to get, so they know. And a lot of people probably been in that survivor category. Like they don't see any point in challenging the narrative. They don't see any point because they're wasting their time. So what's the point? They're there at work. They're gonna get a pension at the end of the day, you know, and they're able to give to their church and give to their social cause, and they're surviving. But then you get those, he said, who are the outsiders. The outsiders, he said, are those who receive their schooling and higher education in the Caribbean or in Africa. So that these guys have not been trained up in the system. And so now they don't have any understanding of racism. My wife's Nigerian. She came here to do a master's degree. She has no, when I talked about race, she's like, what is it? Like, I don't get it. She's never known anything other than being black. And so she's like, I'm just who I am. And so, you know, they put up with it, you know, they put up with it and get on with it. Like, it's not such a big deal. And then he said, you get those who are collectivists. These are the heroic black professionals, he says, who they just they understand it, they get it, and they challenge it. And they don't care about what it costs them to challenge it. There's a hunger and a desire to succeed and develop and progress as people. And so what's happening now, by the looks of it, is that this kind of collectivist thing, the response we're seeing right now is this multiracial, multi-generational, collectivist response where people are saying, you know what, I don't care what it costs me. I don't care if you're going to say that I shouldn't be out here because of COVID. I don't care if we're tired of having to play, like Reverend Ashley said, Tony said before that we started about Lenny Henry and you know, Frank Bruno. You know, we don't want to have to be the clown in the room anymore. You don't want to have to be, you know, playing any games anymore. Like, just accept me for who I am. I am who I am. Understand my story. Respect my story. I respect you. You respect me. And see past my skin color. Don't disrespect my skin color, but see that inside me is a human being that deserves respect and honor, just like you deserve respect and honor. You know, level playing field.
Yeah, level playing field, and that's coming from no. Like we'll know this expression, Tony, from landmark stuff, but it's like not like an always already see. What's that expression?
Always already listening.
Always, like an always already listening. Like, so before the person's said something, done something, you know, like you've decided who they are before they even, you know, the moment you saw them. So it's to remove that always already listening, and perhaps even more than that, to see it as exciting, to be like, great, I've got a real mix of people that I'm interviewing today. I wonder who's going to step up and be that creative solution or that genius that's going to fix this problem, or rather than be looking at the other way, like, oh, who's going to be the one that falls out of this process and putting associations on that. I just wanted to thank Jonathan Collins and Darren Galvin and Law for their comments on the Facebook page. It's great to have you here. Law says, you just described covert racism to the TRL, the silent, confident killer. Thank God you'll never concede to be part of the victimization program. Other people just really grateful for the content. Jonathan Collins says he's from Leicester and he's so grateful he grew up with Jamaicans and Indians and Albanians and every creed and culture. So thank you all for watching. Keep asking questions and sharing. Appreciate it. Blimey, Errol. Tony, anything you can add or feel like you want to comment on what Errol just said? It's Errol, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Errol, because you know, so much has changed and it's really surprised me. Hearing, I asked my stepdaughter, how does she feel about the whole thing? She's 23 and she says she's tired. And
I've heard that a few times this week, yeah.
And you know, she's only 23, and you know, people of our generation, we're tired. And you know, from the time we had the COVID situation in Wuhan, and fingers started pointing at Black people and discrimination that was going on over in that country, I knew this was coming at some point. You know, the fingers being pointed at us. And I just wanted to be in denial of the whole thing and just keep my head down and, you know, be happy in my predominantly Black church. And the more things started to happen and the conversations about, you know, Black men being more prone to being COVID, the attention was being pointed at me as a black man. I'm 52. I fit the criteria to have COVID. I was asymptomatic 2 weeks before, so I was quite ill. And then, and then this whole George Floyd thing. And at first I was like, oh, do I have to deal with this? You know, but I don't have a choice. I've got a son.
Yeah.
I've got children. I've got a whole church. When you do a Zoom meeting with your church, and the elders, the older ladies said they cried, and they cried over that situation, and the pain that you carry on behalf of them. you know you feel convicted somehow to say something, to speak out against it, not in anger, but to say, okay, you're hurting me. you know we've all been hurt, and we need to explain what that hurt is. You can't go to the doctor and say, I've got a pain, and you go, where is it? I've got a pain. You've got to say exactly what it is, what it feels like, so that doctor can understand and begin to diagnose. I'm not saying that the white community are the doctors, but in order for us to understand, um, and begin to walk towards the solution, it's just to really for us to have a dialogue, where we're saying this is what's happening, what we've been experiencing, who we are. Is to the reason why people are angry. If you look at a child who's self-harming, and we can use that as a parallel to youths killing each other, black youths killing each other, self-harming. There's something wrong, right? And so you look into that, and you look at a rape victim, and they say they've been raped, and you don't listen. You say, oh, okay, so it's fine, you'll be fine. There are many victims, and you don't listen, or you don't believe them. Or a child who has been abused, and nobody will listen. I've been in that experience, and nobody listens, and you feel that you are being stifled. It's all downhill. And so personally for me, all I want is to be seen and to be heard. It's as simple as that. So when I speak, people listen. I don't have to make you listen, but it's that respect, that mutual respect, when we speak to each other, when we talk to each other, and to see me as a human being, not to be afraid of me the moment I open my mouth. I can't help the way I speak, or that I can project my voice. I sing, so I can project my voice, but it's all that time having to negotiate and think carefully about what are the clothes that I'm wearing. For Baptist ministers, for example, we don't normally wear a collar and black shirt or whatever, to any engagement. But as a black minister, I would need to. Otherwise, I would be overlooked in certain places.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So if I'm doing a funeral, I wear the whole garb, because I know that people will not look at me or pay any attention to me. But as soon as I put that collar on, that's what I have to do. I mean, on my driving license, it's Reverend, because I can't just say, oh, I'm a Reverend, whatever. It's true. That's what I have to do, so that I don't have to enter these conversations of trying to explain who I am. It's those experiences. And yes, I do keep my head down. I worked hard. I've worked through college, and managed to get my degree in theology, and it was hard, because I was one of those who grew up and thought, no chance, I can't have a degree. That's for those posh people up there, and I thought I got my degree at age 50. And that was a major achievement for me. It might not be for anybody else, but it was a major achievement for me. And to have those goals and keep your head down and believe in, as I say to all our the people in the black community and anybody else, women, especially women in ministry, just do what you are called to do in life, and to do it well. And I know that we have things that oppress us, and we still have to fight through. The good thing about slavery is that we have that tenacity and that strength to actually fight through. And people might say, oh, that's from your ancestors, but I believe it's in our DNA, to keep fighting and keep fighting through, and to keep showing a positive image. And most black people do show a positive image, and we want to be examples to our younger generations. I'm not just a minister solely because God has called me and I've done the study, etc. I'm doing it so that our young people as well can aspire to anything that they're believing in. Yes, they will get their challenges. They will experience some form of racism. Some will fight through that. Some will notice it, and they will need counselling with some of the stuff that they go through. But it's for us not to stop believing that we actually belong and that we can breathe the same space as everybody else that God has created on this earth.
And that's
Can I ask you a question, Johnny?
Yeah, go for it, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so I want to flip it around a bit. I think we could make an assumption that, you know, we understand white culture because we brought up in it. You know, we all watched EastEnders and Brookside and Coronation Street, and you know, we're not the Bill and all. We're British, right? But how would you, as a white man, how would you describe your ethnic culture? And what do you love about your culture, or which was different?
I'm the classic tick the box on the form. You know, I'm white Caucasian. I'm British white Caucasian. I think, you know, I've got a lot of family in America, and in America, when you speak to people, it's very easy for them to say, "Oh, I'm half Irish, a quarter English, and a quarter German." You know, they just go back and they like all the grandmas, grandparents, and immigrants, and they that's who they are. Whereas clearly anyone in Britain can say they're a flipping 1/8 Viking or something like that. But I consider myself British, and actually probably English. You know, since you asked the question, I probably consider myself certainly more English than I do British. And maybe that's some sporting thing as well. I'm a bit of a royalist. I'm happy with our traditions. You know, that side of being British. When I look at politics and stuff, I'm conscious and conscientious when I vote. I feel like I've got too much going on in my life to worry too much about the news and everything else in between elections. But I vote locally and nationally, and I make a big deal when people around me don't. You know, in terms of my pride, I think it's easy as a British person, as an English person, to be like, oh well, you know, well, war, you know, the wars won the war, and we stood up for democracy, and we explored the world, and you know, but then actually, if you start digging into that history, we did explore the world, but we flipping took it over, and you know, I think historically this slave subject, you know, I think that I read an article today which I happened to search up after I followed a vein through the internet, and it said in 2018 the British taxpayer made its last payments on a slave tax, where the British government did a deal with slave owners to pretty much buy the freedom of their slaves, and it took like 100 years to pay it off.
Wow.
And it was as people can search out if they want the article. It says the 2018 article on The Guardian, and it said the Treasury's tweet shows slavery is still misunderstood. And it was in 2018. Did you know in 1883, Britain used 20 million, 40% of its national budget to buy freedom for all slaves in the empire? The amount of money borrowed for the Slavery Abolition Act was so large that it wasn't paid off until 2015, which means that many living British citizens helped pay to end the slave trade. So, like, when I was at school, we studied the Romans, we studied World War I, we studied one of the kings, you know, but it was very much modern history. Like you think about historical impact, like this period of slavery and racism, like that should be the thing that gets taught in history as a way to bridge gaps, to heal harms, and to broaden the understanding, you know. And so I'm trying not to stray too far from the question. I'm, I'm, I'm proud to be English and British, but perhaps not so sure why these days. I think like, if anything, that's kind of, the media muddies that water so much. We're not allowed to be proud to be British, like, or we're not it's very little pride in any of our communities. We're encouraged to be proud about when England are playing football, or when the Olympics are on, or I don't know. I can't really think of anything else. But and when there's a 50th anniversary of the war or something like that. But if you go back much further than that, what is there to be proud of? You could say, oh, okay, engineering. But I think that we need to revisit what we are proud of, and part of that, that statue being torn down in Bristol the other night. I think there is an awakening that needs to happen, and start to question some of those things that we've honoured in the past, and not to clear up our history, because to judge previous generations on our modern day attitudes is perhaps slightly risky, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be spoken about. I was thinking about Comic Relief and Children in Need and all those programs, and we'll watch and we'll cry and we'll be moved by children that have been abused, or orphans in Africa, or we'll all start raising money because they've got to walk 10 miles to school without any shoes on, which is all solid and needs to be brought up. But like, why the hell isn't it 10 hours of what it's like to be discriminated against? And like, if we're going to cry about something, let's cry about that. Like,
can you relate to a time when someone discriminated against your culture in a harmful way, or you felt it harmful?
On a personal level, and this is kind of a micro situation, being a teenager in Chicago when I used to go and visit, and my family are Irish, and so some of the families that I was on the beach with, some of the kids that were lifeguards, or some of the people that we went drinking with, some of them were just kind of a little bit meathead. It was still IRA stuff. And I'm not going to mention his name, of course, but I can remember one guy and his brothers, who were proper singled me out as, you effing English, we're, like IRA type stuff. So that's probably the time when I felt most persecuted. But I also experienced in that moment people standing up for me. And what was going to be the other one I said? I got mugged at a rave once by about 8 black blokes. They just kind of circled me, and we're at a rave, right? So easy picking, it was, but it was just a case of empty your pockets, give us everything in your pockets. And it was like, what the hell's going on? And it was just, and then later on in the night, I spoke to 4 or 5 other people, and they all had the same experience. The same group of guys had kind of moved through this room of 2,000 people, and how many. It doesn't take much to put someone who's off their nut to give them everything in their pockets, which in itself was probably a stick of gum, 20 quid, and but. So I think in those 2 examples, I can speak very lucidly about personal experiences and how intimidating that was, and how that has framed some of my experiences moving into the future. So they're one-off scenarios, not, as Ola said to me, a day 1,000 cuts, not as someone in a primary school. I spoke to a woman this week. Her 10-year-old son stood up for his mate at school, another 10-year-old being bullied because he's black, about being black, by some kids in his school. And I'm like, what? Like, that's happening. So my mind just boggles at where's that kid got that from to come there and be that way. So, but the point I was making is that for black people, as it's becoming really apparent to me, at every step of their life stage, there's been one experience? No, not at all. There's been hundreds of experiences at every life stage. And then you're there as a grown man talking to your children, telling them, like I talk to my kids about going to school. If you're picked on, do this. And when they get older, I'll be like, if you go to a party, do this. But it's become apparent to me that how a black person would speak to their kid about that, what you should do at school and what you should do if you're at a party, is going to be completely different, and probably way more be careful and watch out. And like, so they're actually, so that father or that mother is instilling into their child a level of be careful, watch out, it's not going to be okay. Which I'm like, hang on a minute, why should a black parent have to say something different to their children about what it's going to be like when they go out to the park later, or when they go to a party later? I'm just, that's my level of awakening. I'm like, when's that going to stop? When's it going to be, yeah, watch out when you go to a party, because you don't be sick on someone, and make sure you have a good time. Like, and that's it. Not watch out. Like, I can't. I hope that changes. And in the same way, you know, I hope when if my kids are going to a party, they're not fearful of a group of black lads. Like, why should it be the group of black lads that they're afraid of? I don't know whether that was circumstantial or whether it's pushed on us by the media and movies, and or the fact that that's the community they're in and that's the circumstances they're in. Because if that is the community they're in and the circumstances they're in, I don't think that's okay either. Why have they grown up with that perspective? Just like you guys were saying, like, grow up, give it your best, go for it. Like, you can achieve anything. Great. Surely, yeah, some people are going to end up nicking and robbing and stealing, but why has it got to be one community and not another? Or why have we got to perceive it that it's one community and not another? This is my level of awakening.
I think you're one of the few people that has actually said, you know, a group of black lads or a group of black people. Normally you hear a gang of. That's what I normally hear, a gang of. No matter how young, it's a gang. So if, it could be 5, it could be 10, 15, just having fun. You hear the word gang rather than a group. Those little things you hear and you go, "Oh, why are they suddenly a gang?" You know, it's just one of those things I heard you saying, and it's not like picking this, that, and the other. It's just something as a black man that I've learned. And you know, the other thing you was talking about, things that you worry about as a parent. My son, in primary school, during the last couple of years, he said, "Dad, Mum, can I walk home from school, please?" And you know, even though we said yes, in my head I was like, "Oh, no way, I can't deal with that." In my head, I didn't know that at the time until he asked, and I thought, I can't deal with this. The idea of something happening to my son. And it was, I mean, it took me ages to get used to him walking home from school. And I remember, I think it was a couple of weeks before school was going to end, his term at school. And he said, a guy on a bike rode up to him and said, "Do you want some my chicken, a piece of my chicken?" And he said no, because he understood, he had been educated at school, in class, about county lines and how it's done. And so he had that. Maybe he would have taken that chicken, but he knew he had chicken at home anyway. But it's those things that you worry about your children having to negotiate. And and as a parent, it's like, what do you do? You can pray and you teach your children not to live in fear. Scripture tells us God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. And that's what we have to keep teaching our children. And things do happen, but we can't allow any of our children, black or white, to be living in fear. And neither should we. Neither should we be living in fear either.
Yeah, and that is a level of awareness that I think everyone needs to take on. Like, that's a base. Sure, some of these things are baselines for humans. And we have to dig into why that wouldn't be happening for all of us.
I think, like you said, it's fear. There's a fear of the other. There's a fear of losing some sort of power or status. A fear of losing position. I hear a lot of white people saying, "You know what? This whole immigration thing," and you see all these videos going out saying that white people are going to be the minority, and so there's a fear of those kinds of things. Um, I think my heart and what I show with our church is about reconciliation, so racial reconciliation. So having conversations like these with people who are not like you and hearing stories. It's like you just shared with us, Johnny, about your experience growing up and those. And I'm sure if we spoke longer about it, there'd be some more stories too.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we've all got stories and all got journeys,
Mm.
and we all need to forgive, and we all need to be forgiven, and and that's when that trauma and that pain is released, that we can see more clearly and
Mm.
approach situations with more confidence. Because
Yeah.
some of the hang-ups and chips on shoulder are because we're carrying around experience or pain from experiences from years gone.
Mm.
There's that school teacher that said this or said that. There's that person on your street who threw that at you. There's that those friends in the park who spat at you or bullied you, and there's all those stories that and oftentimes hurt people, and so we've got to be. I think we've got to be gentle with each other, and where possible, where people are willing to have conversations that are going to help each other to grow through this. So I'm really keen to do more things like this to help leaders of organizations do these kinds of things with their teams, especially those that are in diverse communities or leading diverse organizations and teams, to create an inclusive
Mm.
environment and culture where there's understanding. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had school teachers contact me and ask me about, content for their students because they recognize now that this is really pulling on heartstrings, this whole George Floyd thing, and everyone wants to be on the right side of history. Students are not sure about it or they're uncertain how to respond to it. They want to be on the right side of it, but how? But how should they respond? And so
Mm.
there's a need for people like us on this call today, all three of us, to say, look, we know you don't understand, we know you don't get it, but here's the opportunity. Here's the possible
Mm.
moment of breakthrough here. And if I'm
Yeah.
thinking about my children, my kids who are coming after me, and them not being in an environment where there's a culture of fear or culture of any kind of sense of limitation being imposed on them because of the color of their skin, they they're gonna feel so free. They should be feeling like I can be the prime minister in this country. I can be at the highest position in this country. You know.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, the part about forgiveness, because people think that misguided to think that forgiveness is overnight and it's a one-time thing. And, as Jesus explains, we have to forgive 70 times seven, meaning that we have to forgive over and over and over. So even when, this whole George Floyd incident happened, everything is regurgitated, and you have to continuously forgive. Um, and but also have to deal with it. How do we process this? Everybody's hurting. How do we create a safe environment for us to have a dialogue and to negotiate, through the politics, through our various areas that we live in? How do we negotiate and educate each other? Um, I think at first I thought to myself, "Well, why would I have to educate anybody? They should know." And I think a lot of people think that. A lot of black people think, well, they should know. I shouldn't have to tell them because I'm feeling the pain. But yeah, we do have to educate, and we have to educate each other about our different cultures. And not only that, there are isms within our own subcultures as well.
Mm,
Between Jamaicans and Africans and whoever, there are isms, and we have to work past that and see each other for who we are, and to respect each other's cultures as well. And it's not, and we're not going to get everything right. Johnny, you're not going to say the right things at times.
Yeah.
You know. And for many people I speak to, everybody, we're not going to say the right things at the right time. We're imperfect, okay? And we may speak out of anger and frustration and get things wrong, but the most important thing is really just to work towards having a dialogue and keep that dialogue going until we have a safe space for us to grow, to learn, and to breathe.
mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where do you think those breakthroughs are going to come? Is it going to come at government level? Is it going to come in schools? Is it going to come with the next generation? Is it going to come with business owners? Where is there? Is it a set of dominoes that are going to go, or is like what this is? This.
You know, I was thinking about this today, right? And this is really a civil rights issue in the same way as it was for when Martin Luther King and that generation were protesting.
Mm,
People are protesting for civil rights, and the changes came when laws were changed. So segregation laws were changed, for example. And so there are laws. We've got to be clear about which civil rights we're asking for, right? But there needs to be a change. So, for example, we've gone from having segregated schools, where even the church stood up and said, segregated school, God hates when schools kids are educated together of different races. You know, I saw a speech that someone said back in those times. And we've gone from segregated schools now to schools were allowed to come together, but the education is still segregated. What's taught in the schools, the history we're taught, the philosophy of education doesn't bear into any consideration the cultural backgrounds of those in the schools. It's a one size fits all school culture.
yeah.
So if we're going to create a culture of understanding and equality, then we have to there's got to be equality in education. There's got to be equality in education in the classroom first and foremost. So that means that every child needs to understand that either you're going to give them the full history of the British Empire and Great Britannia and all that, and Churchill, or you can't just say Churchill said, never, never, never give up and leave it there. He said a lot of things,
Yeah.
you know. He said a lot of things. He didn't like a lot of people that were not white. If you want to be real about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we've got to give the whole picture. So we need to see some change happen there. We need to see it to be mandatory for leaders to demonstrate cultural competency.
mm,
Leaders in institutions, in the health service, I'm thinking, in politics, in education, in business, in faith-based organizations, um, in entertainments. Leaders of organization have to be able to demonstrate cultural competency.
mm.
And so that, go on, sorry, Johnny, go on, jump
Is
in.
that a better principle than positive discrimination, or do the two sit together?
Well, now there's positive discrimination and positive regard. Like I don't know that I believe in either of those, to be honest with you, because um, I do believe in merit.
Yeah.
Cultural competency um, has someone who's culturally competent. It's like someone who is emotionally intelligent, but in a cultural way. So they're able to understand and perceive um, the nuances in someone's culture and be able to relate to them based on their background, their story, their journey, and not diminish or disregard them because of those things. And so, as we're talking now, like I'd say, Johnny, we connected straight away back in 2010 on the
Yeah.
program we were on, and we've had a friendship. I've stayed at your house, you know what I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and you were at my wedding,
Yeah.
and there's a level of cultural competency that you have as a white man that makes our friendship easy. We can have difficult conversations and heart to hearts about sensitive things,
Yeah.
and it's not an issue. But if someone is in authority and in leadership who doesn't have that ability, has no desire to,
Mm.
then they shouldn't be leading in this generation. They're dangerous. and the perpetuating situation.
Yeah. Subtly, sometimes,
Yeah,
even and obviously overtly at others, but probably the ones that are
yeah,
subtle are more dangerous. Yeah.
Mm.
yeah.
And would probably say to people, I'm not racist. It's just easier not to have too many black people in the office, like, or something like that.
It is that.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. They don't want to upset the apple cart. They want to be politically correct. They want to please the other people who are. It's boy, that whole thing there. Like, I tell you, when we have to work hard, out here. I tell you,
Yeah.
because there are some places, the opportunities, like, they're just not gonna come to me. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line.
Mm.
I have to graft for it, and I have to make my mark. I have to like, you're respected as a black person if you've achieved something. If you've written some books, if you've built something, done something, impacted something, if you're competent, then you can get respect to a level. You can get respect to a level. It's easier, but that's hard. You gotta do that.
I know, but
There's no
still,
way around it.
some of that is still like, oh, look at him! Isn't it amazing? He's done all that, and he's black. Like, it's sometimes I think when you see the people on TV, they're like, oh, we found a black lawyer. Let's see what he has to say. Like, it's I don't know. Maybe perhaps other people don't see that. Perhaps it is really true, but it's
But just
and
just
it's,
go to a
it's
football
obviously
match. Just go to a football match. Go down the Villa or go down wherever, and you'll see 60,000 people there. Maybe a few hundred are black, and they love their players. They love their favorite black striker who's scoring goals for them, and they're cheering him and they're shouting his name. But when they go home, and when they're having their chats around the dinner table about black people, it's a different conversation. But
yeah,
because of the sense of, there's prestige, there's accomplishment, he's a different kind of black guy.
Mm.
yeah.
He's all right.
He's all right, you know.
So where do I think we've kind of touched on this already, but where, with all these protests happening, I hope, it bugs me. I know this is not going to change, but drives me mad when they start the news with them tearing down a statue and chucking it in the river, and then we'll eventually get onto the fact that there was 20,000 people peacefully marching earlier on in the day. That it bugs me that they focus on the fear and the sensationalism rather than the actual message and what's possible. But what do you think is possible? Where can this go from here? Is this the breakthrough? Is it really? And is it like a perfect time? Did we have to have COVID to be able to have this? Did we have to have, like, this year's been crazy? Brexit and Iran and America and China. It's like this weird thing going on where all these the environmental movement with and Greta Thunberg and all everything. It's like there's like so many movements happening, and now a really big one, like the biggest one, is upon us. I love the idea that for anyone that doesn't believe in God, he really is sitting there going, try this on. If you like, have a go at that. If you're going to keep messing with this thing that I gave you,
Yeah.
what's going to happen? What's going to happen?
You can't tell. I mean, it is a boiling pot that's been boiling for 400 plus years. Something was going to boil over at some point. We could say that it was inconvenient because we got COVID, but it's happened, and we have to deal with it in some shape or form. I do believe that it is great that we're having this dialogue together. Because for me personally, I feel safe to share how I feel and what's been going on, and to listen to yourself, Johnny, share your experiences. White people have had their experiences of being victims of crimes, etc. And just hearing the different perspectives, we all can contribute to each other in conversation and create something new. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be created overnight, but we need to be committed into enter into this dialogue and until it's eradicated. We can either look at the elephant in the room, or we could ride that elephant out, knowing that it's going to break a few windows, etc. The elephant needs to come out of the room, and that is racism and the culture that it embroils as well. We need to have we're all together in this country. I speak for this country. We're all together, and we have to live together. But how we live together, like I keep saying, how do we ensure that we all breathe the same space that we so rightly need to do? And yes, for Black people, they will always tell you we have to work twice as hard, and get 4 times much more rejection, and we still have to press through. But it doesn't stop us having that conversation with our counterparts, to discuss how do we move forward, how do we move forward in love and respect for each other as well.
Yeah. And actually ask that question, like consciously ask that question, like I've done this week, to consciously ask that question. Raheem Sterling and everything he did in the football sort of sphere earlier this year, I was like, hey, okay, that's good, that's great, like what he's done there, but didn't take it on board any deeper than that. And particularly around, was it the World Cup, when he was getting a bit of stick, and you're just like, actually, what was his motivation? It wasn't his motivation because he's a famous footballer, you know. It somewhere in amongst what he's done, he's come from his experience that his dad passed on to him and shared to him what it was like growing up, his experience at school, his experience like, and then he said enough is enough. But people, and the media in particular, hear it as, oh, well, someone's tipped over his toys, like this was something that happened to him last week. No, this is something that happened to him over his whole life, and he's actually putting his career on the line to some degree by saying, I am going to say something, I am going to make a stand here. And I think that we all have to do that, that we all have to look at ourselves and think, okay, well, where are those subtleties? What can I experience in my life? What do I see around me? Where am I going to say, let's organize that, let's do something in town, let's do something in my cub group, let's make a podcast where we focus on this subject. Like, let's not let this just become last week's news.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've got to pray, number one, right? Obviously, I'm a pastor, so I'm a Christian, and I believe in the power of prayer. I believe we've got to pray together. I believe that the church could take a lead on this as well, in the sense of modeling to the world and to society how we reconcile. We've got the best example in Christ, of Christ reconciling us back to God. Then the next step for me is awareness as well. So, like we've been talking today and sharing stories, as Tony, as you said, as Johnny said, there needs to be awareness, because oftentimes there is just not an awareness. One of my friends described it to me as, feel like I'm at he said, I feel like I'm at a funeral and I don't know the person that's being buried. I have no idea who they are. Now, I thought that was a really, really,
It's powerful,
concise way of describing it. You know what I mean? And so we need to work together to create an awareness by sharing stories and understanding that we cannot be colorblind, because most people have been taught to be colorblind and accept people as human. And that makes sense on one level, but actually you're discounting the whole history and the reality of the experience of life of that person. So we've got to create an awareness. Acknowledge that with that awareness, we're not trying to condemn people. We're not trying to put shame, or like a negative shame and guilt, on white people or on anybody for that matter. What we're trying to do is bring it to the surface so we can collectively and communally acknowledge it and repent, confess it, forgive each other, and repent of that paradigm, of those thoughts, those behaviors, those attitudes, and repent and take a different course. And then we can begin to repair relationships and bring healing and bring just a new level of restoration, really. So I think it is possible. and I think the church can lead on it. I'd encourage anyone listening just to read up, get some of the resources that are out there. There's a great book called by Latasha Morrison called "Be the Bridge." Another really good book called "White Fragility" as well. But so many great books out there, as you can imagine, they're all bestsellers now on Amazon.
Yeah.
But go out and read some content. Go out and read some content on the subject matter, and you know, be informed.
Yeah, and watch stuff. Netflix. I've talked about the 13th. You know, on if reading's not someone's thing, there's so much content out there today. Podcasts, audiobooks, like any of those books that could be listened to on an audiobook, I'm sure. Netflix, you watch one thing, it'll spin you on to the next thing. People that watch this, watch that. I think it's all, we're going to sit and watch garbage on TV. You might as well watch something, get challenged. Like I all those, some crazy crap on TV, right? Zombies and gangs and like just stuff. And I'm okay with that. I'd like to keep it a bit more comedy based, but for anyone picking what to watch over this next 6 to 12 weeks, pick something that could broaden your perspective. Pick something that could teach you something you've not seen before, that could have you look at your neighbor in a different way, that could have you listen to the next thing that Raheem Sterling says on TV in a new perspective. That can make you look at the bus driver in a different way. I think that's what everyone's responsibility has to be in this moment, is to say, where's my compass? What am I thinking? What do I know? What are these people going on about? Have I really taken a chance to find out? Because otherwise, without being extreme, like, you know, people often ask, right? I know it's always awkward bringing up Hitler, right? But people often ask, how the bloody hell did he get to power and do all that stuff? Because not enough people paid attention. Apart from the socio and economic conditions, bottom line is not enough people paid attention to what was going on before it was too late. And in a kind of reverse situation here, there we are in a time and a moment where if enough people pay attention, then we can propel this situation forward, not hold it back.
Yeah, Johnny, I just wanted to ask you, how do you feel? What are your thoughts after our conversation so far?
I do worry a little bit. I think the average British person is just a bit crap, you know, just a bit. It's not my problem. Like, they might get upset about it and outraged about it for a day. I think that the average, you know, and I think Brexit is an example of that. I'm not here to say whether leaving or staying was the right thing or not, but I do think the degree to which people looked at what was the right thing or not for many people was not enough, or they were very right about their view rather than going and finding out. You know, the number of people I saw on TV like, well, we lost our right to choose in 1950 and I'm going to take it back now. And I'm like, what about the 50 years in between? Like, and I think that's everybody's responsibility right now. I think that Black communities, as you know, as you pointed out, Errol, you know, like my version of inner city, East London, Black communities, like, it's just high rises and it's a bit rough, or it's getting prettied up now, but it's like they're all there, they're all like dumped in that area. Like, why? What goes on? What in a way, people can quite easily say, well, they bought it on themselves, or they must be there for a reason. I don't know, like where like people fail to realize that the reason started 100 years ago, or some other version of that. And so I'm going to kind of repeat myself now, but I want people to take a today perspective and say, well, what do I want the future to look like? What do I want? What, you know, I don't think that I think a normal way. I don't, and I've not been, I've not grown up this way. You know, as a mildly funny story, one of my good friends, Farhat, Pakistani guy, we were at uni in my first year at uni, and him and I were walking across the university campus, And for some reason we were talking about going to the shops, and I said about going to the pack shack, like just made some slang reference to Pakistani packet, like, and he's like, excuse me. And I was like, oh, sorry. I mean, I don't mean you. I mean, like, and, you know, and that was a moment for me, you know, that was a moment coming from like I'm a worldly person. But there was something in my dialogue that it took a mate, a Pakistani mate, you know, to say to me, yeah, you can't say that. And so in that moment, I took a step forward, whether it was a small step forward, whether it was a monumental step forward, whether it paved the way for other steps forward. I'm not sitting here like priors, like, oh, I'm amazing, because far from it. And I hope in sharing that, I give other people the opportunity to realize where they've not been all right. And it's not about being PC. I really hear that from what you were saying earlier, Errol. You know, mates should be able to banter with each other. You know?
Yeah, we do.
I got like, it should be okay that I can talk about my big black mate Errol, like, or, you know, like it should. There's a degree to which mates, if an Irish bloke, an English bloke, and a Scottish bloke, like the classic joke, if they're on a building site and being mates together, so long as that is what's going on, they probably would take the piss out of each other from where they came from or how they spoke or whatever. But there's a level to which all of us need to know where it all fits in and how it's all right, and whether it is offensive or not offensive, or take responsibility. And then at the level at which we're okay with that in our own community and in the circle, we've got to look outside of that and kind of think, well, why is that person getting shot in the street? Or why is that someone in the football stadium screaming at a football player because they missed a penalty, and using that kind of language? And what kind of education we need to go what direction we need to take education in, such that that friend of mine and her 10-year-old boy isn't having, I mean, well, maybe we'll always have to defend our mates, and that's okay. But have it be some, you know, really deeply racially motivated intent, like where that little 10-year-old is now suddenly believing that black people are not as good as him, or they're, I don't know, it's like still. I was at a dinner, right? A girlfriend of mine, when I was about 17, we were at a dinner at her house, and the parents had some South African friends over, and this guy was saying, he was like going, it's scientifically proven black people have got smaller brains, right? So this is in 1991 sort of thing, like just right around apartheid and stuff like that. So it was like, in my life, I've experienced those awkward moments where you're sat at the dinner table going, are we serious? Are you hearing this? Or a time in America where we went to visit my cousin at university, and we were all quite drunk, but one of the lads, group of about 6 of us having breakfast at about 4 o'clock in the morning, one of the lads was directly racially abusing the waitress. And it was probably one of the most uncomfortable experiences in my life, where I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I didn't know where I was. I was drunk. I was in a cafe, like on some university camp. I was like, so getting up and walking out, I didn't really have like, where am I going to go? and eventually the conversation came around to enough of us saying, you've got to stop. Like, that's bang out of order. Like, what are you doing? But still, like, these are just like, it's just confusing in my brain trying to rationalize and answer your question. And I'm conscious of like warbling on about it, but I hope in sharing this, it makes it okay for other people to say, I'm confused. I think I might have said something wrong in the past, or I hope I'm not now, or I'm going to watch something and I'm going to realize, oh my gosh, people are being shot, people are being suffocated, there's this many people in prison that shouldn't be. So anyway, I've said that before, but where I think it's going to go is, I hope that in towns across the country, people peacefully protest, that in random situations, people take a knee as a statement of this is where I'm at, you know, whether it be on TV, whether it be at the start of a council meeting, whether it, you know, like I don't think people need to make outrageous gestures, but I do think that the more we can normalize a new normal, that then we'll see change, that we won't see stupid headlines on newspapers, that we won't see the news leading with gang smashing stuff up when 200,000 people were protesting peacefully. I think that's where I think media is just a horrible thing as well. I think that's another whole big subject.
What's next in your journey, Jenny?
Next on my journey,
where do you go from here? In you talk about the confusion, like I'm not crystal clear what the confusion is. And where are you going from here?
Maybe confusion sent the conversation up in the wrong direction, but I kind of make a point about saying, I don't really watch the news. I checked out of the news after my divorce and my mental health at that time. I found the news so negative that I stopped it. Around COVID, when it started, I had the news on. I'm in a few WhatsApp groups where I feel like I'm getting information from source, and it's fine. And then I carry on checking that source of news, but I stopped with the media because it was all just so going round in circles, just drivel, about it. And so where this subject goes, I'd like to think that I will continue to find out more, so I've got a better perspective, so I can talk more lucidly about the subject, so that when pushed, I can give an opinion that matters and makes a difference. For Team Superdad, it would no way more occur to me that I would have more or less black people in Team Superdad for a reason other than they just hadn't heard about it. So I don't think from a business perspective, I don't know. Well, maybe I wouldn't naturally choose a coach or an expert to come and speak to the Team Superdad community based on their color. Might I think now, have I had enough black people speak to my community? Maybe I would. Maybe I'd do that. In the same way that I might think about women. Have enough. If I had an event on, would I look and see, is there a good representation of women speaking at my event? Even though it's a dad's event, I for one, particularly with my attitude towards my future and my family, I want women involved in my life. I want to fall back in love. I don't want to proudly march on single, But I think that maybe there's a level of consciousness for me in that if I'm trying to educate and mentor and lead men in a certain direction, I might be more aware now of, have I got a rounded view? But then even then, as far as asking you to come and do it, Errol, when it launches, you'd just be on that list anyway. So it's difficult to say what I think next. As far as my children go, I'm encouraging them. I'm making sure that they watch bits of news. We've talked about that. I think that's important, that our kids aren't naturally going to be interested, but I think it's important that they are, and also being careful at the same time, because my children they're not noticing color at school, certainly not in my kids' school. And there is a broad ethnic mix in my children's school, even in sunny Maidstone. So I will continue to make sure that they don't see a distinction between their friends based on color or country of origin, and that's for certain. And then what more could I do? In the London podcasting community, I've challenged other podcasters to do something like this, and I think it would be amiss of me not to continue in some way to make sure that this subject stays on the agenda. Basically, I think that's certainly, for me, that's where I can see the difference I can make.
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge you for actually bringing this to the table and inviting the both of us to have this conversation. As difficult as it is for you, even for me, it was difficult to have the courage to come here and to share my thoughts and feeling, and you kind of worry at the back of your head. For some people, they don't worry at all. For me, I worry, well, is this going to make me a target now? But regardless, I've always been a target, I realize. And, when you stand up for the gospel, you stand up for injustice, you are a target, and, I always say this to people, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you do this? And the worst thing that can happen is you could die. I know it sounds really morbid, but that's the worst thing that can happen. Now that you know that, just do what you need to do, do it fully, live life fully. And so to be able to express that to people, to be a positive influence, to believe in what you believe and knowing what you want, like, asking you questions, the thing for everybody is to actually ask themselves, what is it that you want while you're on this earth? What is it you want from this situation? And is the easy answer is I just want it to go away. It soon blow over. That's not the answer. But as a human being, seeing people and hearing people, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to contribute to this community, to this earth, as a human being? And some will contribute very small things, and others will contribute in a large way. But it isn't a time for anybody to hide. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have to address it. But I think, for self-examination, you're having questions bombarded at you psychologically in your head at the moment about the things that you've done and the things that you want to do. And it's to engage in that dialogue with yourself and with other people, to sort this horrible mess out. And it's the same thing with the governments and the councils and the Black community, the white community. Everybody is like, what is it that you really want? And one of the things about this pandemic is that we've been isolated and we've had lockdown, and so we're thinking about the things that are really important to us, whether we wanted to or not. Our marriages, our children, our work, our jobs, everything we've had to really focus on and think, what do we want out of it? How do we negotiate that? And it's the same thing with racism. We can't avoid it. We've been in lockdown and we have to address that issue, whether we want to or not. So it's how do we move on? It's like, what do I want? What do I want for my children? What do I want for my wife? What do I want for my community? How can I be a contribution to both Black and white community?
Yeah.
And I have to ask those questions for myself too.
Yeah. Well, and that tips into the whole Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. As a white person hearing that argument, I'm like, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about Black Lives Matter. That doesn't mean that all lives don't matter. We're on this subject right now. Don't confuse it by bringing in other subjects here. Like, of course, all lives matter, but actually, if we don't start with, well, it's like right now, this is very apparently where we're focused. And, if we can focus on that, then by virtue of that, all lives matter. Because if you say this isn't that important right now, when there's videos of someone having their flipping neck squished until the life is sucked out of them, then clearly that's where we're focused. So, wow. Thank you, guys. I really... I'm kind of glad you said that, Tony, because I wasn't apprehensive, but even things like America and my family in Chicago and part of American immigration now, you share your social media channels, and I'm sure a computer machine runs through it. And, so I'm like, oh, what am I saying? And is that going to impact me visiting my family? And so they're real things. Like, I'm pretty certain that I haven't, but in the same way that Errol went shopping in Coventry, he was pretty certain that he hadn't done anything wrong, and he's getting his ass whooped when he gets home for it. So there is levels of what am I saying? Levels to which we are concerned about everything that we do and say, and I think that's the important thing as well, that we have the confidence to push past that, because if none of us do, then nothing will change, and if all of us can just a bit, then the power of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people just pushing a bit, oh my gosh, hopefully that will bring some change.
That's right.
Any anything I've missed? Anything you want to say before we wrap this up, guys?
I just want to say to anyone listening that whether you're black or white, you're a child made in the image of God. Don't let anybody make you feel inferior. Don't let anyone look down on it or intimidate you. I have a choice to decide whether, we hear about white privilege and all these different things. A lot of that is a concept that is based upon my interpretation or my reading of the other individual. I can see somebody as better than me and myself as inferior. I can see the person as weak and actually ignorant, So what I'm saying is that you choose how you respond. I choose how I respond to any perception of prejudice or injustice. It either grinds me down, or it builds me up. I'm encouraging us all to let these things build us up. Let's grow stronger. Out of struggle comes growth. Out of struggle comes growth. So by the grace of God, we'll all learn from this. We'll all grow stronger. We'll all be gracious to each other and respect and honor each other's humanity, if you like, and come through and come out of this as better people by the grace of God.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard work. Whether you're black or white, it's all going to be hard work, and that's okay as long as we're working together and working together with a common goal, which is to respect humanity, respect each other, and I simply want to love you and be loved back. That's it.
Yeah. That is, wow, that's beautiful, Tony. That is, every human can get to that point. You hold your baby, you hold your child, you look at the child, you love it, it looks back at you, it loves you back. Like that level of innocence with each other as human beings is a beautiful goal. Imagine a beautiful goal to imagine. Totally. Awesome. Well, remind us of your individual churches. I think it's important, if anyone's near to you and they've felt a connection with you tonight, that they can come and check you out.
Yeah, I'm Tony Ashley, and my church is Stoke Newington Baptist Church, and obviously we're not open. But yeah, go on to the Facebook page or onto my Facebook page and connect with me, and then we can include you in our services. That'd be lovely. Really great.
Perfect. I'll put some
in London. Yeah.
Yes, I'll get some links off you. I'll put it in the show notes and in some of the live stream comments as well, which we can share there. And Errol, where's the bridge?
Yeah, the bridge is in Harborne in Birmingham. Our website is www.thebridge.family, and all are welcome. We currently meet online. Just drop us a line by email or on Twitter or Facebook, The Bridge Church, Birmingham, and we welcome you with open arms.
Awesome. To everyone listening, thank you. Team Superdad is the community and program for dads who want more. We play more, be more, make more. And I hope this conversation has challenged us all in many areas to take a look at ourselves, to take a look at our attitudes, I think most importantly, to take a look at how much we know about this subject. And you could say all subjects in that, but right now we're talking about racial equality, we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about the generational impact across communities. And if you have a view on what's going on today, don't just make it about today. Take it upon yourself to wise up, to educate, to learn up. Errol shared some books. I'll get some of the things that I've watched on Netflix. Pay attention, dig slightly deeper than the news, and when the opportunity comes, do something a bit beyond your comfort zone to be one of the many that bring some change about in this world that we live in today.
Thank you, Johnny.
Awesome. I'll press stop, and hold tight. We'll do our goodbyes afterwards. Team Superdad out.